Good morning and welcome to our Zoom with the Fort Langley National Historic Site. We have Ammon here with us who's going to be teaching us a little bit about the gold rush today. Ammon, you can take it away.
Good morning. How are we doing? Good? Excellent. So again, my name is Ammon. I'm a heritage interpreter at Fort Langley National Historic Site. So I get to be one of the people that gets to dress up and play the role of one of the fur traders at the historic site. But today we're going to talk about the gold rush and what it led to. And that actually is how British Columbia was born. So if you were with me last week, we talked about that. So I'm just going to share a few slides here on how BC was born. So excellent. So last week we talked about this part of the world where we see what is today known as British Columbia and the states of Washington and Oregon. And that red line, that's the Columbia River. And we talked about Fort Vancouver. And that's the first Vancouver. It's not the city of Vancouver we know today, but it was the very first Vancouver. If we were to drive there from Langley today, it would take about 3.5 to 4 hours. So back then, that was the most important fort. And then later on, by the year 1827, on the Fraser River, which is that yellow river on the map, Fort Vancouver decides to build another fort, and that was Fort Langley. Now, on this map, of course, Fort Langley was used to trade for furs. Does everyone recognize that fur from last week? Yeah, a beaver used to make hats, of course. But of course, Fort Langley also made money by trading for salmon. Salmon we would send to Hawaii. We'd also get things like cranberries. Cranberries we would send to California. And to top it all off, we had a farm that was 2 times the size of Stanley Park. And that farm again had cows, hogs, goats, potatoes, potatoes, potatoes. Now, Fort Langley and Fort Vancouver, there were only 2 Hudson's Bay Company forts that would have been on this map, but overall, the Hudson's Bay Company would have had up to 90 different trading posts on this map. And it was a big operation. So the Hudson's Bay Company said, this is getting really confusing for us. So we have to divide this into 2 areas. So we're going to name it the Oregon Country. If you were from the United States, that's what you'd call it, the Oregon Country, because the Hudson's Bay Company shared this map, this whole area, with the United States of America. But the company, they didn't like that name. So the company divided it into 2 parts. They called it New Caledonia up at the top. And then the bottom part, they called the Columbia Department. And they put a border in between the 2 themselves. And the border was right about there. So all of the Columbia River fell into the Columbia Department. And anything north of that border, they called New Caledonia. Caledonia, that was the ancient name of Scotland. They couldn't use Nova Scotia, that was already taken. So they used the ancient name of Scotland, which was Caledonia. Now, later on, the Americans, when they were sharing this land with the Hudson's Bay Company, they started to talk with the company saying, you know what, we want an actual border. We want to find out which land belongs to the United States and which land belongs to the Hudson's Bay Company. So the company said, okay, fine. Tell us where you would like your border to be. And the Americans said, we want our border to be up here. because we want all of the Columbia River. And if you look at that Fort Langley, that means Fort Langley and even Vancouver Island would be part of the United States today. But then the Americans asked the Hudson's Bay Company, where would you, as the Hudson's Bay Company, like your border to be? And the Hudson's Bay Company said, we want the border to be down here because we want the whole Columbia River. And if that existed today, that means all of Washington State would be part of Canada today. But after some negotiating, they said, you know what? We are going to come to a compromise. We are going to agree that the border will be here. And that's where the border is today. So Fort Langley and the Fraser River is where all in BC today. But if you notice, that border cut the Columbia River in half. So half of the river is in British Columbia today, and the last half is in the United States. And the Hudson's Bay Company decided to call all the land north of this border New Caledonia. And if you notice, that big star, which was Fort Vancouver, they closed that fort because it was in the United States. They said, we're not going to use it anymore. And they built a new fort called Fort Victoria on Vancouver Island. And just to make sure that that border didn't go over the island, they wrote a letter to this lady. And they said, Queen Victoria, we have named a fort after you. It's on this island. Would you like it to be yours? So Queen Victoria said, sure, that island is now mine. And it's called a colony, which means it's her property, but she doesn't live there. So if you were the queen, you live way over in England. And if you have to travel from England all the way to Fort Victoria, Vancouver Island, that ship again had to go all the way around South America. Who remembers how long that trip would take? 6 months. If you are the Queen of England, do you want to spend 6 months on a boat to come all the way over there? Probably not. So instead, she wrote a letter to the boss of Fort Victoria. It was this guy, James Douglas. And she said, James Douglas, you are going to be the governor of my island. You are going to look after Vancouver Island for me. So Vancouver Island now belonged to Queen Victoria, but James Douglas is looking after it for her. And then, all of a sudden, in 1853, on the Fraser River, we find gold. And like I asked some of you last week, if you found gold in your backyard, would you tell anyone? Probably not. This is James Yale. He was the boss of Fort Langley. And when he found gold, he told his workers at Fort Langley, we're going to keep this gold top secret. And they kept the gold a secret for 5 years. And during those 5 years, Fort Langley built many gold mining supplies from our blacksmiths. We bought gold mining supplies from around the world. We stocked up on food because we knew the money in a gold rush isn't looking for gold, it's selling supplies to gold miners. And then in the year 1858, we felt we were ready to supply gold miners. If we're lucky and we tell the rest of the world, maybe 5,000 gold miners will show up. And we can sell all the supplies to those gold miners. So in 1858, we tell the rest of the world that there's gold in the river. You tell the world that there's gold in the Fraser River, all the gold miners show up. How many gold miners do you think showed up? 3? 30? 300. 300's a good round number. 3,000. Surprisingly, 30,000 gold miners showed up. That's enough people to fill up the arena where the Vancouver Canucks play twice. And Fort Langley only had 25 families working there. We're in a little bit of trouble. Most of these gold miners are coming from California, and they want to come find the gold in the river. And the Hudson's Bay Company doesn't have enough people to protect the river. And these gold miners want to make New Caledonia part of the United States. So we're running into a big, big problem. So James Douglas comes up with a brilliant idea. He says, we're going to write a letter to Queen Victoria. But remember, Queen Victoria is 6 months away. But we found a solution. There was a faster way now by the 1850s to get to England. It's not going to take 6 months. There's a place called Panama, and they built a railroad. So now to get from Vancouver Island to England, there was a shortcut. You didn't have to go around South America. You could go this way, take the railroad through Panama, and that trip only took 9 weeks. So if you wanted to get a letter to the Queen, you could get it there very quickly. In August of 1858, the Queen gets the letter. She writes another letter. This is called a proclamation, and sends it all the way back to James Douglas. And in November of 1858, James Douglas shows up at Fort Langley. And see this painting that represents this meeting. He showed up, there he is, wearing the blue on the left of that painting, but he showed up with a lot of people from the military. You see guys in red coats. Those are men from the army. They're called Royal Engineers. You see another guy in a blue coat on the right. He is the admiral. He's the man in charge of the Navy, all the battleships that came up the Fraser River. And James Douglas and all these men showed up inside Fort Langley, and 100 people crammed inside the house of the boss. And right in front of everyone, James Douglas told them all that New Caledonia doesn't belong to the Hudson's Bay Company anymore. The Americans won't get it either, but Queen Victoria now owns the land. But she's not here, so he's going to be the boss. But see the Hudson's Bay Company flag that's waving outside in the fort? Take that down. Put up the British flag now. And since the Queen is in charge, but he's the one who's here right now, he will make all the rules. So Governor James Douglas will be the big boss. Oh, by the way, the Queen hates the name you picked for the land. Caledonia is the ancient name of Scotland. She wants everything to be British. So the Queen Victoria back in England, she has taken a look at this map herself, and she has noticed that the Columbia River was the most important. And this river was now had a border, and that border had cut the river in half. So Queen Victoria herself decided to call her new colony the British part of the Columbia River. And that's how you got the name British Columbia. And this all happened in a ceremony in the big house, the home of the boss of Fort Langley, on November 19, 1858. It's what we call Douglas Day in BC. But that is the birthday of British Columbia. November 19, 1858. Here's the shocking thing a lot of people might not recognize. This happened 9 years before Canada was born. British Columbia is 9 years older than Canada. Canada was born in the year 1867, way off on the east coast. Even when Canada was born, it was 4 different colonies put together. So you had Upper and Lower Canada, today we call them Ontario and Quebec, as well as Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. They asked British Columbia to join, and British Columbia replied with, "No, thank you, you are too far away." British Columbia didn't join Canada until Canada was 4 years old, and that was in 1871. But this is why we call Fort Langley the birthplace of BC. All because someone found gold. Everything changes. So we went from being a little shopping center looking and trading for beaver furs. Then all of a sudden we start shipping salted pickled salmon to Hawaii. And then we find gold. And we keep it a secret for as long as we can. But before you know it, the rest of the world finds out, and 30,000 gold miners show up. And all of them want to get inside our shopping center. And all of them want to take over the land. And we need help. And that's why we sent word back to Queen Victoria to help us out. So James Douglas, the man in charge of Vancouver Island, showed up right at that big white building at the top of the hill in that picture. And he told the Hudson's Bay Company that Queen Victoria now owned the land. But she wasn't here, so he would be the boss. But that's how British Columbia was born. All because of the gold rush. But the surprising thing of it all, that Fraser River gold rush, it only lasted for 8 months. It wasn't that long at all. Everyone thought that that was the big mother lode. That's where all the gold was. Surprisingly, it wasn't. It was a big mistake. 6 years later, they found out where the true gold pile was, and that's what we call the Caribou part of British Columbia, places like Barkerville.
Boys and girls, does anyone have a question for Amin? Something you heard that you want some clarification on? No questions. See, you must just share the information so perfectly that no one seems to have questions at the end of our chit chats, hey?
None.
No questions. So how about I ask you guys a question? So if you found something very, very valuable in your backyard, so I'm gonna ask the question, would you tell anyone? And I saw a lot of heads shaking no. So I'm gonna ask, if you found gold in your backyard, what would you do with it? So pretend you're, after this, you go outside and play in your backyard and you find gold. What would you do with it? Someone want to share? What would you do with the gold? McKinley.
I would put it like in a safe and hide the safe in my room somewhere.
That's a good idea. Lincoln, what would you do with it?
What I do is I have like a case that could hold 48 Hot Wheels cars. What I did was I actually did a little bit more because it could hold about 45 cars and 3 monster trucks. Well, instead I just filled it with a whole bunch of cars, but what I would do is I'd hide it right in between my stack of cars. No one would probably find it.
You would
And for
hide
extra, but then for extra, I'd hide it in one of my drawers in my desk because I have tons of those.
Well, that's a clever idea. Good place to put it.
Rebecca, what would you do if you found gold?
I would probably bury it somewhere, and then I would like go get it when I really need it. Like when I really need it in life, like.
Cool. So what I'm hearing from most of you is that you would hide it and you would keep it a secret. What would you do if you found gold in our yard?
Hide it.
Would you tell me?
No.
No. If gold is hidden, is it actually worth anything? Is it worth it if you just keep it hidden? No, I'm sure there's like some analogy and metaphor there that we could say about hiding things and not using our skills and our talents. But Ammon, do you have anything else
I
that?
would never tell her.
Okay. Do you have anything else that you would add about the gold rush?
Yeah, if you come visit Fort Langley once we finally open in the big house, you'll see in the office there is a safe. Every big house would have a safe. And at one point, the safe of Fort Langley would have had 800 ounces of gold that the men of Fort Langley would have found. And that was the gold that they sent down to San Francisco, because all the gold we found was in little flakes or in little nuggets. And we sent that all the way down to San Francisco, to a place called the San Francisco Mint, to be smelted. So melted down into gold bars. And that was our way of telling the rest of the world that there was gold in the river. And that's how 30,000 gold miners showed up. But the easiest way to think about this is just to think about it yourself. Like, if you were playing in your backyard and you found gold, and all of you, most of you said you would keep it a secret. Imagine if you kept doing that every single day, running to your backyard, not telling anyone, but you're digging and keep finding gold. And then one day you come home and all the grade 7s from your school have surrounded your house. Because you just kept it a secret, but you didn't do a great enough job because the word got out. So the next day in the morning, you run back to school and you apologize to your friend and saying, sorry, I kept it a secret from you, but there's actually gold in my backyard. So if you guys want to team up with me, hopefully you can help me defend the backyard from all the grade 7s. If we are successful, I will share the gold with the rest of my class. So you and your classmates all run back to your backyard after school. By the time you get to your backyard, it's not just the grade 7s. The rest of the school population, even the teachers, have surrounded your backyard. So you and your friends from your class run inside your house. You meet together in your dining room. You come up with a brilliant idea. We have to find a way to defend the backyard from your school population. One of you comes up with a brilliant idea. Let's write a letter or an email to the class president of the closest high school. Maybe she can help us. Class president sends you an email back saying, I'd love to help you, but I'm too busy studying for final exams. But if you want, I can send over the high school football team. Who would want the high school football team to come help you guys out? Good, I see a few hands. Excellent. So the next day, the high school football team shows up and says, hey, back off. This yard belongs to the kid and their friends. The rest of the school back off. The rest of the school backs off. You get your backyard back. Do you think the football team is just going to turn around and go back to the high school? No. But they know you're good friends with their class president. So they're going to turn to you and say, you know what? You can keep playing in the backyard. You can keep finding gold as much as you want. But from now on, the backyard belongs to the high school. Is there anything you can do about it? No. That's exactly what happened with Fort Langley and BC. The names are just different. So imagine that story of you finding gold in your backyard. That's what happened to James Yale, the boss of Fort Langley. That football team, their captain was James Douglas. The high school class president, that's Queen Victoria. And that's how BC was born. And that was to prevent the school from taking over the backyard.
Awesome. That was a really helpful way to think of it. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem.
Milo, you said you have something that you want to share. What's up?
Yeah. If I found gold in my backyard, I'd put it in display.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's secure.
Yeah, I'd make sure I'd have a safe that's unbreakable, but it's made out of glass, and then I can brag to my friends that I have gold.
Yes, that would be a good thing to do. Everyone wants to show off gold.
Right. And then you may end up with everyone in your backyard panning for gold, and then that whole story starts all over again. So, boys and girls, we are running out of time today, but I am so glad that Amin will be back here with us next week on Friday to teach us something more about BC and how we came to be here and stuff about the fort. So let's say thank you to Amin, and that we will see him next Friday at 9:30.